I got 10 tips for all your self-taped auditions. Hey everyone, I'm Matthew Cornwell with Get Taped here in Atlanta, Georgia. Got a haircut, first one in 5 months. Our mission at Get Taped is to dispel fear in actors by empowering them through our classes, workshops, audition tapings, and YouTube videos like this one. So be sure to subscribe, and if you want updates when we release new content, hit that little bell icon. Now, on to our topic, 10 tips for self-taping. Before we begin, we're going to do a jump cut to our taping studio. Welcome to our actual taping studio here at Get Taped. This is what your audition will look and sound like if you come tape with us. To be clear, you'll look and sound like you. It'll just be better quality like this. So here are 10 tips for self-taping, whether you do it at home or come to a taping service like Get Taped. Number 1, people often ask us what camera to use when they're building their home studio setup. You could use a Canon Vixia camera like this with a fancy mixer for adding microphones. But honestly, your cell phone will work just fine. Your camera is very oftentimes not going to be the weak link in your home setup. It's going to be audio and lighting. For lighting, just Google the term 3-point lighting and you'll find some tutorials on how to set up your lights. In a nutshell, 1, 2, 3. That's where you put your lights. The real tip I have for you is to make sure that all of the bulbs you're using are the same color temperature. On every bulb, there is both the wattage and the color temperature. In this case, 5500 Kelvin. What's a Kelvin? Doesn't matter. Stay away from mixing sunlight with your indoor lamps, because you'll end up with blue light from the sun and orange light from your lamps, and it'll combine to create some really weird effects on your skin tone. Now on to sound. I highly recommend that you get an external mic, like a boom mic, or a lavalier mic, which is something you can just clip right to your clothing. Either of those will work, and they will improve your sound, but the last piece of the puzzle when it comes to sound is the acoustics of your space. Now I got a master's degree in acoustics, so I know a lot about this, and it's hard to dispel it down into just a little bite-sized nugget for this video. But bottom line is, if you have hardwood floors and hard walls that are parallel and there's nothing on them, which there probably won't be anything on your back wall, then those hard surfaces are just going to reflect sound everywhere. And even with a nice external mic, it might not sound that great. So here's a couple things you can do. If you don't have a fancy mic and the mic is just coming from your cell phone or the camera, put a comforter on the floor between you and the camera. Stand a coat tree off to the side and hang a bunch of coats on it, and then if you can do the same on the other side, do that. That'll sop up some of the extra sound and make your overall tape sound better. For more detailed tips, you'll either need to contact us personally or do some research online. Tip number 2, entering and exiting. Did that bother you, how I just entered? Doesn't seem to bother casting directors either. We all know casting directors have a lot of pet peeves when it comes to auditions and self-taping, but never once have I seen in their taping instructions not to enter or exit the scene. Since 2005, I've been taping actors and I've never had that feedback. Not in the written taping instructions, not in Q&As with the casting directors. So it seems to be that they don't really care, which means now it becomes your decision. And if you're still unsure, do the compromise. Maybe you're gonna just walk up to the mark to indicate the entrance and yet still be on screen the whole time. You can do the same thing with your exit, where you just sort of drift back and don't quite leave the frame. Your audio might get worse, but at least you'll still be on camera if that's important to you. Number 3, to stand or to sit? Short answer, it's up to you. Some acting teachers believe that you should always stand unless absolutely necessary to sit. I tend to be a little bit more liberal with my viewpoint on this. I feel like the actor should do whatever they want. Sitting will take away energy from you, but if that's appropriate for the read, I say do it. Plus, depending on the framing, they won't notice. So again, that's up to you. In fact, I might be sitting right now. With standing and sitting and entering and exiting, we just want you to take ownership over your audition. This is your career after all. Which brings me to number 4, knowing more than your reader. Whether you tape at a professional taping service like Get Taped, or you're using your roommate who might be an actor, or you bring a friend over to help read with you, you need to know more than they do about everything related to this audition. You need to know the lines better than they do. You need to know the show better than they do. You need to have researched the showrunner, if it's a TV show, the director, if it's a film, the studio or the network behind it, the lead stars, the writer, all the people involved, because you never know when one of those pieces of information will be extremely helpful in your audition. And what you don't want to do is come walking into a service like this and go, hey, do you know anything about this? Because you've already put yourself at a disadvantage and you've suddenly put a burden on the reader. I'm not the casting director. I'm not the director. I'm not the writer. I don't know the right answer that you're looking for. So you need to be armed with all the information possible so that you can make the best decision for you. This also means you need to know the taping instructions forward and backward. What's the framing like? Is there a slate? What do you need to say in the slate? Are they asking for 2 takes? Do they only want 1 take? Are the files separate? Are the files all together? This is information we don't necessarily have. So you need to be ready to give it to us. Take control of your audition. Take control of your career. Because no one else besides you cares more about your career than you. Number 5, when to submit. If you get an audition notice and there's only 24 hours before the deadline, well then just get the darn thing in as fast as possible. But, for instance, George Pierre here in the Southeast likes to give actors anywhere from 7 to 14 days notice for an audition. Bless you, George. In that case, there's an equation to solve, which is when is the right time to submit? Well, if you've got a one-liner, don't be afraid to submit same day when you receive your audition notice. But, and this is from George's mouth to your ears, if you have a 5-page audition and you receive the email at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday and you submit at 4 p.m. on that same Wednesday, George is going to think you didn't put any prep work into that audition. So as he watches your tape, he's going to be really suspicious. He's going to think, this actor isn't quite prepared. They're not committed to their craft. They're not committed to their own career. So if you're given a longer period of time to submit, you need to submit as fast as possible such that you can do all of the necessary prep work to give the best performance possible. Sometimes that might mean that you can get it all done in 1 day. Sometimes it means you are waiting until the day before the deadline. Just don't wait until 1 hour after the deadline. When you submit late or ask for an extension, you're putting the cast director in a precarious place. They might have been looking forward to your audition because you were so perfect for this role. And when you submit late, it just puts them in a weird position of holding back their submission. They might have already been forced to give selects to the producer, and then one of their favorite actors gets left out of the mix. And that tarnishes their opinion of you. If you aren't one of their favorite actors where they were anxiously awaiting your submission, well, you think they're going to hold off and wait for your late submission before they present their options to the client? I don't think so. So in no scenario does submitting late do you any good. Get it in on time. Number 6, should you hold your script? If this was Y2K, I'd say yes, because the old wisdom was when you walked into an audition, because back then you were always walking into a physical audition, you needed to remind the client or remind the casting director that this is not a finished performance. This is a work in progress. And holding the script was a sort of a psychological reminder to them that this ain't done. Also, if you got through your first take and the director says, you know, they're on the second page where Michael says, I've been busy, I'm sorry, we're just going to skip that line. If you're not holding your script, then you'd be thinking, wait, where does Michael say that line? Oh, crap. So holding your script was always a good idea in person. And it's still a good idea to bring your script with you if you have an in-person audition. But the conventional wisdom nowadays, especially here in our Southeastern market, is that you need to be off book. For your self-taped auditions, because they are now looking and sounding so great, there's this subtle expectation that the performance needs to be more polished as well. If you're playing a doctor and in the scene you have to read some really hard medical jargon, but the stage notes say that the doctor reads it off of his clipboard, then for crying out loud, put your script on a clipboard and just read it straight off of the clipboard. Don't try to memorize unnecessary dialogue that on the day when you're shooting the darn role, you're going to be reading it off of a prop. I've seen actors before hold their actual script in one hand and a blank clipboard in the other and try to remember that really hard dialogue and then having to refer back to their script while they stare at a blank clipboard. It's embarrassing. Just make it easy for yourself. Number 7, eye lines. If there's only one other character in the scene, that should be your reader. They should be standing right next to the camera. They shouldn't be standing this far away from the camera. And take advantage. I've had actors who won't even use me as the visual, and they'll look at some random point in space instead of looking directly at me. Use that human being, especially if they're another actor. If you have multiple characters, you can split camera and have 2 visuals, especially if you have 2 different feelings about those 2 different characters. I love my sister very dearly, but I'm estranged from my brother. So I'm going to split the camera. If you're the CEO of a company and you're having a board meeting and you have 5 board members in the scene that speak, but they're all yes men, and then you have that one dissenting voice, then combine all 5 of the yes men into one visual on that side of camera and then put the one dissenter on that side of camera, or vice versa. Doesn't really matter. One thing I do want to mention is some actors have been taught, I don't know why, that they need to be looking at the reader from the moment the audition starts. Well, that's great if that's what the previous moment is, but what if you're playing server and the other character enters the restaurant and then you notice them? It's really creepy if you're just standing there going, "Hi, welcome to Applebee's. Is it just one?" That's creepy. "Hi, welcome to Applebee's. Just one?" That makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? Use your own taste and judgment because, again, this is your audition and it's your career. If it makes sense to you, try it. You can always look at it back on the monitor to see if it played well. Number 8, framing. Most casting directors will insert framing instructions into their overall taping instructions. They might say waist up, like I am right now. They might say chest up. They might say shoulders up. Those are guidelines. Let's use our server example that I did in the previous tip. Maybe the casting director has said, we want close up, from the collarbone to the top of the head. Well, I'm sorry, but server, who has 2 lines and doesn't affect the trajectory of the scene or the show, they're not going to get a close-up on set. They're never going to frame that actor closer than a cowboy or maybe a waist-up shot. So why would you do that in the audition? All you actually end up doing is making your lines look more important, and then the casting director will watch your tape and go, why is Matt overdoing that? He should have done less with it. So don't be afraid to do it a little bit wider than what they are asking for because it makes more sense. In short, make sure you know what the taping instructions say, but then use your own taste and judgment as to whether or not you want to tweak that framing slightly for you. Number 9, backdrop, wardrobe, props. I lumped all these together because it's all the visual elements that have nothing to do with your face. For backdrop, something nice and neutral and simple. Gray, blue, anything that's not going to distract. For wardrobe, first of all, make sure you pop off of that color, so don't wear that exact same gray when you go to your audition. And if you're going to a taping service where you don't know what their backdrop is, bring a couple options. And then with wardrobe, dress towards the character, but don't go crazy with costumes. If it's not something you would wear in public, you probably shouldn't be wearing it in your audition. And with props, a stethoscope around your neck is not going to book you the role. So do not go crazy with props. If it's something that's going to exist outside the frame, maybe I want to hold this bottle of water because it's grounding me in some way, it gives me something to do, and you never see it, well then perfect. It doesn't hurt. The casting director will never know. But if you're doing something that's going to make noise outside the frame and it's a prop, well, then that's just going to distract, and they're not going to know where that noise is coming from, so don't do it. Otherwise, use your own taste and judgment once again. You see a theme here? We're telling you to take ownership over all of these things. And number 10, how do I stand out? I saved this for last because it's the only real tip that has to do with craft. All the other 9 tips were basically technical tips on how to improve your self-tapes. To stand out with your performance, first of all, don't even be asking that question if you don't have years of training under your belt. Because the types of things that new actors will do to stand out before they've had any training are the things that'll be really embarrassing. People do weird things to quote-unquote stand out, and it only backfires. But once you've had some training and understand this business a lot better, there comes a point where you feel like you're plateauing, like you're not booking as much as you want, and actors ask that question all the time in Q&As with casting directors of, hey, how do I stand out? How do I make my auditions stand out? Especially when it's self-tapes, and they're gonna be watching 50 tapes per role. How do I stand out? Well, the answer you always hear is just be yourself or make bold choices. And here's the kicker. Both of those are the exact same thing. Are you intrigued? Because here's what they're actually saying when they say just be yourself. They're saying, be the version of you that I perceive you to be. Be the version of you that I perceive you to be. So based on your headshot or their prior knowledge of you, they called you in for this role or they asked you to self-tape for this role, knowing that you already have some sort of essence that is perfect for this role, that it makes you castable in this role. And when you come in person or when they see you on tape and you're trying to be something else, you're trying to layer something on top, you're trying to show off all those years of training in one performance because you're so desperate to finally book something, well, first of all, they smell the desperation and they're thinking, oh, why did they do so much? All they have to do is just be themselves. And if you could actually get into their head to find out what that means, what it is they're perceiving about you that maybe you are just unaware of, it would make acting so much easier. So, how do you do it? How do you bridge that gap between what you know to be true about yourself, what you think to be true about yourself, and then these decision makers, these people who are gatekeepers to booking work, what is that difference in how they perceive me? And how can I figure that out? Warning, I'm about to pitch you something. I invite you to go over to our sister channel, Sam Christensen Studios Atlanta, and watch some of the videos there, and head to our website to see a little bit more about the Sam Christensen image process. In this 4-day intensive workshop, we do an exhaustive plunge into who you are based on what you know to be true about yourself, and who you are based on how you're perceived by the rest of the world. And we synthesize those two things together so that when you do walk into an audition and they say, hey Matt, just be yourself, you know exactly what that means. And then they go, wow, that was a really good read. And back to what I said about bold choices, when you are just authentically yourself, people perceive that as a bold choice because everyone else is trying to fit into some cookie cutter mold of what they think the role should be, instead of just making their own unique choices, instead of developing their own signature style of acting. Just like you have your own handwriting, you're going to develop eventually your own signature style of acting. And when you just allow that to come through naturally and authentically, people perceive that as, wow, that was a bold choice. And you're thinking, really? I was just being me. Because each one of us are so complicated and unique that if we just allow that beautiful, complicated person come through, it is such a joy to watch. And clearly, not a lot of actors are doing that. So that's how you stand out. Thanks for those tips, Matt. That's kind of weird. Feel free to leave a comment below or email us. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon if you want to be notified of future content. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on set.